Case 1. Charles Victor Thompson's name has stayed in the news for many years because of a crime that happened long ago and because of an escape that surprised many people across the United States. On April 30th, 1998, he shot and killed Glenda Dennis Hayslip and Darren Keith Kane in Texas. Police arrested him soon after, and the case went through court for a long time. A jury later decided on the death sentence. After more legal steps and a resentencing in 2005, the punishment stayed the same. His execution date is now set for January 28, 2026, by lethal injection, according to official Texas prison records. The crime itself was serious, and it brought deep pain to both families involved. Reports from the time show that the relationship between Charles Victor Thompson and Glenda Denise Hayslip had many problems. Court documents describe arguments, stress, and trouble that built up before the incident. On the day of the killings, both victims were found with injuries that made the case clear to investigators. The court later confirmed that the shootings caused the deaths, even though Thompson tried to argue that medical care played a part in how Hayslip died. Judges reviewed these claims many times across the years, and each review supported the original findings. The case took an unexpected turn in 2005 during the resentencing stage. While being held inside the Harris County Jail, Charles Victor Thompson created a fake identification badge. He told officers that he worked with the Attorney General's office. With that false badge, he walked through a doorway and out of the jail without struggle or resistance. It was one of the most surprising jail escapes in Texas at the time. News stations all over the country reported updates every few hours. Officers searched widely as they tried to figure out where he had gone. For some people, the escape seemed unreal because it happened in such a simple way. 4 days later, the search ended in Shreveport, Louisiana. Officers found Charles Victor Thompson near a liquor store while he was using a payphone. Reports from news outlets said he appeared calm right before he was taken into custody again. Once he returned to Texas, security around him became much tighter. The escape added more attention to the case, and many people still remember that part of the story as strongly as the crime itself. As the date January 28, 2026 approaches, many years of legal activity have come to a close. Court records show that his appeals reached the United States Supreme Court, and the court decided not to take the case in 2021. This left the original punishment in place. In September 2025, a judge officially signed the order that set his execution date. The Texas Department of Criminal Justice added his name to the list for 2026. Families of Glenda Dennis Hayslip and Darren Keith Kane have waited more than 2 decades for this final step. Their loss has shaped their lives ever since 1998, and every new report about the case brings fresh attention to their story. Case 2. Kendrick Antonio Simpson's case is one of the most serious cases in Oklahoma. He is a man who was found guilty of killing 2 people in 2006 after a fight that started at a club and continued at a nearby 7-Eleven store in Oklahoma City. Court records explain that the victims were Glenn Palmer and Anthony Jones. Witnesses said the argument grew very tense, and it ended with both men being shot. Police arrested Kendrick shortly after the crime, and the case moved through the courts for many years. The jury later decided that the crime involved more than one victim, involved past violent behavior, and showed a risk of more harm, which led to a death sentence. Kendrick Simpson's case reached the Oklahoma County District Court for trial, where the jury found him guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. In 2014, the court confirmed the death penalty after reviewing all the details. Kendrick's lawyers challenged the verdict several times. They asked courts to look at the case again, check the fairness of the trial, and review the punishment. Each appeal was studied by the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals and later by federal judges. Every time, the courts decided that the conviction and the death sentence should stay in place. Because of this, Kendrick remained on death row at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary while the legal process continued. Kendrick's legal journey also included a challenge in federal court. His lawyers asked judges to look at things like evidence, witness statements, and jury instructions. The federal court reviewed everything and kept the sentence as it was. This meant Kendrick stayed on Oklahoma's list of people waiting for an execution date. Oklahoma has a long history of scheduling and rescheduling executions because of medical rules, court orders, and staff concerns. Due to these issues, several inmates had their dates changed in the past, which caused delays for many cases, including Kendrick's. Kendrick Simpson's execution date was finally set for February 12, 2026, after another death row inmate received clemency in 2025, placing Kendrick next in line. News reports from the Oklahoman, Yahoo News, and court summaries explained that Oklahoma officials submitted a request to schedule him once they had space in the state's execution calendar. The Oklahoma Department of Corrections later added his name to the 2026 list. Local reporting also explained that the long legal timeline made his case one of the most watched cases on the upcoming execution schedule. Just before we introduce the next case, please support my channel by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. This kind gesture from you would help my channel grow. Thank you very much. Case 3. Christa Gale Pike's name has been known in Tennessee for many years because of a very serious crime that happened in 1995 when she was only 18. On January 12, 1995, police said she took part in the killing of another student named Colleen Slemmer in Knoxville. The case moved very fast through the courts, and by March 1996, a jury sentenced Christa Pike to death. She became the youngest woman on death row in the United States at that time. After many appeals and long legal battles, the state later set her execution date. The events that led to the crime started when arguments began between Christa Pike and Colleen Slemmer while they were both part of a job training program. Reports say that tension grew over time, and Christa believed Colleen was causing trouble for her. On the night of the crime, Christa Pike, along with 2 others, walked with Colleen to a quiet area near the University of Tennessee Agricultural Campus. It was supposed to be a private place to talk, but it turned into a deadly attack. Police later collected strong evidence linking Christa to the scene. Court documents explain that she not only admitted her involvement, but also gave details about what happened. The evidence, the confession, and the witness statements made the case clear for the jury when they reached their decision. After the sentencing, Christa Pike's case did not disappear from public attention. Because she was only 18 at the time of the crime, her lawyers argued that her young age should be considered again. They said she had mental health problems, a difficult childhood, and emotional struggles that should reduce her punishment. These arguments appeared in many appeals over the years. Courts reviewed medical reports, past interviews, and expert opinions. Still, every major court, state, and federal decided that the original sentence should remain. Her case moved to the federal level, where a series of appeals were also denied. In 2016, another request to change the sentence was rejected. By 2021, the higher courts confirmed that the conviction and sentence would stay in place. During her time in prison, Christa Pike was involved in more problems. In 2001, she attacked another inmate. The incident left the other inmate with injuries, and Christa faced new charges for that behavior. Later, in 2004, prison officers discovered that she had talked with another inmate about trying to escape. The plan did not happen, but the investigation into it brought more attention to her case. These events added to her record and made her situation even more complicated. In September 2025, the Tennessee Supreme Court issued an official order setting her execution date for September 30, 2026. This date was part of a larger schedule that included several other inmates. But Christa's date stood out because of the history behind it. Tennessee has not executed a woman in more than 2 centuries, and her case is the only one involving a woman on the state's death row today. Many legal experts, reporters, and true crime followers have been watching closely to see what will happen next. Case 4. Tony Von Carruthers is one of the people Tennessee has scheduled for execution in 2026. His name has been in the state's court system for more than 30 years because of a very serious case that began in the early 1990s. Even today, many people still talk about his case because it has taken so long, involved many court steps, and includes crimes that deeply affected several families. Carruthers was found guilty of a 1994 triple murder in Memphis. Court papers show that the 3 victims were Marcellos Anderson, Deloy Anderson, and Frederick Tucker. When the three victims went missing, their families reported them, and investigators began looking for clues. As police followed the information they were given, they found signs that led them toward Carruthers and other people connected to him. When the victims' bodies were discovered, the case moved forward quickly. Prosecutors brought 3 counts of first-degree murder, along with other charges related to the events surrounding the case. In 1996, a jury reviewed the evidence and found Carruthers guilty. After that verdict, the judge sentenced him to death. The case did not end with the sentence. Instead, it became a long and complicated journey through the courts. Many lawyers worked on the case at different times, and several of them withdrew. At one point, Carruthers even represented himself in parts of the trial. This decision became one of the major issues raised later, because his lawyers argued that he should not have been allowed to handle parts of his own defense. The state argued that the court made the correct decisions based on the law. These disagreements created years of arguments and kept the case active for a long time. Once the conviction was given, Carruthers began filing appeals. These appeals went through many levels of the justice system. He sent appeals to the Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals, the Tennessee Supreme Court, and also to federal courts. Each appeal included different claims. Some claims focused on witness statements. Others questioned the legal steps taken during the trial. Some focused on whether Carruthers was treated fairly when he represented himself. Every time the court studied the details, they came to the same conclusion: the original sentence would stay in place. By the middle of the 2010s, most of the main appeals had finished. Even though smaller legal motions were still filed from time to time, the major decisions had already been made. At this point, the case slowed down but never fully stopped. Carruthers remained on death row, waiting while Tennessee organized and updated its execution schedule. In 2024 and 2025, Tennessee completed a new schedule that listed upcoming execution dates for several long-standing cases. During this update, Carruthers' execution date was officially added to the calendar. The Tennessee Supreme Court document clearly lists May 21, 2026 as his date. After more than 30 years of court hearings, motions, trials, and appeals, the state has now set a final timeline. Case 5. Gerald Robert Hines' case stands out because it involves 2 killings in 2002, long investigations, questions about past family tragedies, and many years of appeals. For people who follow death penalty cases, Gerald's name appears often because Ohio continues to keep him on the official list while the state works through problems in its execution system. Gerald's case began with the killing of his wife, Jill Hand, and a man named Walter Lonnie Welch on January 15, 2002 in their home in Delaware County, Ohio. Gerald told police that Welch broke into the home and attacked him and Jill, turning the situation into a sudden shooting. He said Welch was the one who caused the danger and that he shot to defend himself and his wife. But when investigators examined the scene, they noticed details that did not match Gerald's story. Prosecutors later said that Welch did not break in at all, but was lured there by Gerald. They also pointed out that Gerald had collected insurance money after the deaths of 2 earlier wives, raising questions about past family events. All of this information was presented to the jury during the trial. The courtroom process was long and complicated. The jury listened to witnesses who described the relationship between Gerald and Welch. They learned that Welch had a criminal past and had known Gerald for many years. Prosecutors argued that Gerald planned to kill both Welch and Jill to make the crime appear as a home invasion. They also claimed that Gerald wanted to stop Welch from pressuring him for money. The defense told a different story, saying that Welch was unpredictable and dangerous, and that Gerald was only trying to stay alive when the situation turned violent. After hearing all the evidence, the jury found Gerald guilty of 2 counts of aggravated murder. In 2003, the court sentenced him to death. Gerald's appeals lasted many years. His lawyers asked the Supreme Court of Ohio to overturn the conviction, arguing that the jury did not fully understand all the details and that the evidence should be reviewed again. In 2006, the Supreme Court of Ohio looked at every argument and decided the original decision was correct. The conviction and the death sentence stayed in place. Gerald's case then moved to the federal courts. His legal team filed a habeas petition asking federal judges to review things like witness statements, evidence collection, and jury instructions. The federal courts also upheld the conviction and death sentence, leaving his case unchanged. The later years of Gerald's case became tied to changes in the state of Ohio. The state did not carry out any executions after 2018 because it could not get the drugs needed for lethal injection. This created a pause in the death penalty system. Even though courts continued to set dates for people on death row, none of the dates could actually move forward. In some cases, dates were changed or pushed back several times. For Gerald, the state finally set a firm date of June 17, 2026, which placed his name on the national list of people scheduled for execution in 2026. But because Ohio is still facing problems with its execution method, the date may not happen unless the state changes its laws or finds a new process that courts approve. Before we move to the next case, if you've found this video interesting so far, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. This would help the video reach a wider audience on YouTube. Thanks for your support. Case 6. Cedric Allen Ricks's name appears on the official Texas Department of Criminal Justice execution calendar and also on national lists that track upcoming executions in the United States. His case remains one of the most talked about Texas capital murder cases because it involves the deaths of 2 children and the serious injury of a third. These events happened in Hurst, Texas, on May 1, 2013, and they led to a court decision that changed the rest of his life. Ricks was arrested shortly after police arrived at a home where a violent attack had taken place. Officers found 3 children and an adult woman who had all suffered severe injuries. 2 of the children did not survive. A 12-year-old boy survived but had very serious wounds. According to official records from the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, the attack involved repeated stabbing. Medical teams confirmed these findings, and the surviving child later described what happened inside the home. His words matched the physical evidence found at the scene, including injuries, blood patterns, and the location of the weapon. These details became central to the case that prosecutors presented in court. During the trial, which took place in Tarrant County, prosecutors explained that Ricks acted with intent during the attack. The surviving child gave a powerful statement that described how the attack unfolded. Medical experts confirmed the injuries, and investigators matched Ricks to the events through physical evidence collected inside the home. The jury listened to several witnesses, studied the reports, and reviewed the statements made during the investigation. After hearing all of the information, the jury found Ricks guilty of capital murder. In 2014, the court sentenced him to death. After the sentence, Ricks began a long series of appeals. This is common in death penalty cases. His legal team challenged different parts of the trial, including the handling of evidence and the way the jury reached its decision. State and federal courts reviewed these appeals, but each was denied. The ruling stated that the original trial followed the correct procedures, and the evidence against Ricks remained strong. With these appeals denied, the Tarrant County Court was able to set an execution date, which became March 11, 2026. As the execution date approaches, Ricks still has the right to file additional last-minute appeals or ask for a stay. This sometimes happens in capital cases, especially when defense teams raise new legal questions or when outside groups request further review. However, as of the most recent public updates, there are no reports of any new delay or emergency action. Case 7. Cleveland Ramon Jackson's execution date is set for July 15, 2026, according to the state's official schedule. Jackson's name has remained in Ohio's legal system for more than 20 years because of a deadly shooting that happened in Lima, Ohio in 2002. The case drew strong attention because the victims included a very young child and a teenager, and the court process stretched across many years. The story begins on August 8, 2002, inside an apartment where several people were gathered, including children. Court documents explain that Jackson and another man went to the apartment during an ongoing conflict involving someone who lived there. When they entered, witnesses said that the people inside begged them not to harm the children. Despite these pleas, gunfire broke out. 2 lives were lost. 3-year-old Jayla Grant, and 17-year-old Lenashia Williams. Others in the apartment were also shot or hurt, and the entire community was shaken by how sudden and painful the event was. Jackson was arrested soon after the shooting. Prosecutors brought charges including aggravated murder, attempted murder, and aggravated robbery. Medical reports, survivor testimony, and witness statements were presented at trial. The young ages of the victims made the case especially difficult for the families and for the people who worked in the courtroom. Prosecutors argued that Jackson fired the shots that caused the deaths, while his defense tried to raise questions about parts of the case. After reviewing the evidence, a jury found Jackson guilty in 2003, and the judge sentenced him to death. The long appeals process began immediately. Jackson's lawyers challenged different parts of the trial, including issues involving evidence, statements from witnesses, and points about how the case was handled. His appeals reached the Ohio Supreme Court, the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, and the U.S. Supreme Court. Each level reviewed the filings carefully. Although the appeals raised many claims, the courts kept the original conviction and the death sentence in place. Because of this, Jackson stayed on Ohio's death row as the years passed. Ohio later faced delays in carrying out executions for many inmates. Changes in the state's lethal injection system, drug availability problems, and statewide scheduling adjustments pushed several execution dates forward. Jackson's execution date shifted more than once for these reasons. Local Ohio news stations also confirmed that the date had been moved to July 2026 as part of the updated schedule. This made his case one of several older cases receiving new dates after earlier postponements. With the date now set at July 15, 2026, many eyes are on what will happen next. Legal teams continue to watch for any last-minute filings or changes, but as of now, the schedule remains active. Case 8. Anthony Darrell Dugard Hines' story has stayed active for almost 40 years, and it is still discussed today because his case has moved through many different courts over a long period of time. It even reached the highest court in the United States. Each court looked at different parts of his case, reviewed old information, studied new arguments, and examined every detail again and again. Because of this long history, his case became one of the most followed death row stories in Tennessee. People who read about crime, law, and court decisions often recognize his name because his case has been reviewed for so long, and every step has added more attention. Anthony Hines was found guilty of killing Catherine Jean Jenkins, a 54-year-old motel worker, in 1985. She worked at the Seabon Motel in Kingston Springs, Tennessee. On the day she was found, she had many serious wounds, and police quickly opened an investigation. They searched for anything that could help them understand what happened. During their search, they found several pieces of evidence that pointed toward Hines. Reports showed that he was linked to the victim's car, her car keys, and a shirt with blood on it. Police also said that when they questioned him, he gave different answers at different times. These changing explanations made the investigators look at him more carefully because they wanted to know why his story kept shifting. When the case went to trial, the jury listened to all the information. After looking at the evidence, they decided that it was strong enough to say he was guilty of murder, and he was sentenced to death. As time went on, Anthony Hines continued to challenge parts of his case. He did not stop trying to change the outcome. Many years later, his lawyers said that the defense team from his original trial had not explored every possible lead. They argued that another man who found the body should have been investigated more deeply. In 2020, a federal appeals court agreed with Hines's lawyers. The court said that the earlier defense team should have looked into that information more closely. This decision was important because it meant that Hines could have received a new trial or a new sentencing hearing. For a short time, it looked like everything in his case might change after so many years. But in 2021, the U.S. Supreme Court reviewed the ruling and made a different decision. The Supreme Court reversed the appeals court's opinion. This meant the earlier decision giving him a new chance in court was no longer valid. The Supreme Court explained that the original jury's verdict should stay in place. They said the evidence against Hines was strong, including the way he handled the victim's car, the keys, the shirt, and his changing statements. Because of the Supreme Court's ruling, the death sentence became fully active again, and his case moved back onto the path toward an execution date. Later on, Tennessee reviewed several death row cases and decided to set execution dates for certain inmates. News reports stated that the execution date for Anthony Hines was set for August 13, 2026. Tennessee law gives inmates who were sentenced before 1999 the choice between two methods of execution: lethal injection or electrocution. Because Hines was sentenced long ago, he is allowed to choose which method will be used. Case 9. Melvin D. Bonnell Jr.'s case started on November 28, 1987, inside a small apartment on Bridge Avenue in Cleveland. 3 people lived there: Robert Bunner, who was the victim, and 2 others named Shirley Hatch and Edward Birmingham. Very early in the morning, around 3 a.m., someone knocked on the kitchen door. When Bunner opened it, the person stepped inside, and shots were fired. Hatch saw the man come in, and Birmingham later said that when he ran to the kitchen, he saw the attacker leaning over Bunner and hitting him. Both Hatch and Birmingham told officers that the man looked like Melvin Bonnell, someone they recognized. Police found Bunner with 2 bullet wounds, one in the chest and another in the lower part of his body. He died shortly after. The police response happened very fast. Officers began searching the area, and moments later, they saw a blue car driving backwards down the street with its headlights off. The driver sped away and crashed into a nearby funeral home. Officers said the driver was Melvin Bonnell. They arrested him at the scene. Not long after, Birmingham was taken to the station, where he again said that Melvin was the person he saw inside the apartment. Police then searched the route of the chase and found a .25 caliber pistol. Investigators said the gun belonged to Melvin, and later testing linked the bullets pulled from Bunner's body to that same weapon. The trial took place in 1988, and prosecutors said the evidence clearly connected Melvin to the shooting. They pointed to the gun, the shell casings found in the apartment, the eyewitnesses who said they saw Melvin inside the home, and the police chase that happened minutes after the attack. The defense said the case needed more testing, but the jury believed the witnesses and the physical evidence. They found Melvin guilty of aggravated murder and aggravated burglary. After hearing all the details, the jury recommended a death sentence, and the judge agreed. The appeals began right away. Melvin's lawyers argued that more items should be tested, especially since some evidence had been stored for many years. They asked courts to check whether the state had handled all the materials correctly. In 2018, Melvin asked for more DNA testing, but the Supreme Court of Ohio said the results would not change the outcome and denied the request. In 2020, Melvin's lawyers said they found old bullets and shell casings in boxes that the state once said were lost. They argued that this raised new questions about the handling of evidence. The courts reviewed these concerns, but the conviction and the death sentence stayed in place. Melvin once had an earlier date in 2020, but it was stopped. Later, the state added new dates to the calendar, and Melvin's current date of November 18, 2026 is part of that updated list. Case 10. Danny Lee Hill is one of the prisoners listed for execution in the United States in 2026. His case has stayed active for almost 4 decades, and it remains one of the most closely watched death row cases in the state. His case is often used as an example of how long death row appeals can last in the American justice system. Danny Hill was found guilty of killing 12-year-old Raymond Fife in 1985 in the city of Warren, Ohio. Reports from that time say the young boy left home on his bicycle and did not return. He was later found with very severe injuries and was rushed to the hospital. Doctors tried to help him, but he could not survive the attack. Police began an investigation that pointed toward 2 teenagers, Danny Hill, who was 18 at the time, and Timothy Combs, who was 17. Investigators said Hill made several statements that connected him to the crime. They also examined physical findings and information from witnesses. When the case went to trial, Hill was convicted of aggravated murder and sentenced to death. Combs was treated differently because he was a minor, and under the law at the time, he could not face a death sentence. He was given a separate sentence in the juvenile system and later moved into the adult system as he grew older. Over the years, Hill's case did not fade. Instead, it became the subject of many legal challenges. One major issue involved questions about Hill's intellectual ability. His lawyers said that he was unable to fully understand the situation at the time of the crime and argued that he met the legal definition for intellectual disability. Under U.S. law, a person with a qualifying disability cannot be executed. This argument led to many new hearings, reviews, and expert evaluations. At times, different courts reached different opinions about his mental ability. Some psychologists said Hill met the standards for intellectual disability, while earlier courts did not accept those findings. Another complicated part of the case involved the bite mark evidence used during the original trial. Some modern experts have raised questions about bite mark science in general, saying it is not always reliable. Because of this, Hill's lawyers argued that part of the evidence presented at trial should be reviewed again using updated scientific understanding. These arguments kept the case active in both state and federal courts. Court records show that in earlier years, Hill won temporary relief from a federal appeals court. But later rulings, including decisions from the U.S. Supreme Court, upheld his conviction and sentence in place. Ohio courts also reviewed his disability claims again and again, but each time, the state courts ultimately ruled that the record did not meet the legal standard required to overturn the death sentence. Even in 2023 and 2024, Ohio courts continued reviewing parts of his case, showing that the legal history remained active even after many years. In October 2025, state news outlets reported that the Ohio Supreme Court agreed to hear more arguments about whether Hill could use a civil procedure rule to present new information about his disability status. This shows that even with an execution date already on record, his appeals were not fully closed. However, the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction still lists July 22, 2026 as Hill's official execution date. Case 11. James Derrick O'Neill's name has been part of Ohio's criminal justice system for more than 30 years, ever since the crime that placed him on death row. His case remains one of the oldest active death penalty cases in Ohio, and the journey from the crime in 1993 to the upcoming execution date shows how long and complex capital cases can become. The events that led to the conviction began on December 7, 1993. Court records show that O'Neill went to the home of his wife, Carol O'Neill, after a period of serious conflict in their relationship. Witness statements and trial documents explain that the couple had been arguing, and Carol had asked him to move out of the house. On the night of the crime, O'Neill entered the home without permission. He followed Carol upstairs to her bedroom. According to prosecutors, his anger grew during the confrontation, and he shot her. Carol died from her injuries. Investigators later confirmed that the bullet that killed her matched O'Neill's gun, a key piece of evidence presented at trial. The crime did not end there. Court documents also state that O'Neill attempted to shoot Carol's son, but the gun failed to fire because it jammed. This detail became an important part of the case because it showed that the violence could have taken more than one life. Prosecutors argued that the act was intentional. When the case went to trial in Hamilton County, O'Neill was charged with aggravated murder, including firearm specifications. Although he was initially charged with aggravated burglary as well, the burglary-related charges were dismissed because the house was legally his marital residence. The core murder charge, however, remained, and the jury found him guilty. During sentencing, the jury considered the seriousness of the crime, the attempted shooting, and the evidence of force. They also reviewed details about O'Neill's background. At various points in the appeals process, lawyers raised questions about possible low intellectual functioning or emotional issues that might reduce his responsibility. But after hearing expert testimony and reviewing the evidence, the courts found no proof of significantly impaired intellectual ability. These claims were rejected, and the original death sentence was upheld. Over the next several decades, O'Neill filed many appeals. These included challenges to the murder conviction, complaints about trial procedures, and arguments that his sentence should be changed. Each time, state and federal courts reviewed the case. The rulings consistently supported the verdict from the original trial. In 2013, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit also upheld his conviction, leaving few remaining options. Later appeals focused on Ohio's execution method, with O'Neill and other inmates arguing that the state's lethal injection protocol created risks that violated constitutional protections. In 2021, the Ohio Supreme Court rejected these arguments, ruling that the protocol could remain in place. Even though the courts upheld the sentence, the execution dates continued to move. In 2023, Governor Mike DeWine postponed O'Neill's planned execution again. After reviewing the schedule, the governor set a new execution date, August 19, 2026. This date now appears on the official Ohio execution calendar. Case 12. Jerome Henderson has been in the Ohio prison system for almost 40 years, and his case goes back to a crime that happened in Cincinnati on March 3, 1985. Even after many years of appeals, court hearings, and legal challenges, the state has kept his death sentence in place. According to court records, the case began when police were called to the home of a woman named Mary Akoff, who was 26 years old. She had been attacked inside her apartment. She suffered multiple stab wounds and died from her injuries. Her 10-year-old daughter discovered the scene and called for help. Investigators collected evidence inside the apartment, including blood patterns, signs of forced entry, and clothing with stains linked to the attack. They also looked at Henderson, who lived nearby. Witness information and physical evidence led police to arrest him later that same day. Prosecutors charged Henderson with aggravated murder, burglary, and attempted rape. During the trial, the state presented evidence such as a coat and shoes with blood on them, along with statements from witnesses who saw Henderson on the night of the crime. A medical examiner also testified about the wounds found on Akoff. The jury listened to several days of testimony and reviewed the materials collected by the police. In the end, the jury convicted Henderson of aggravated murder, burglary, and attempted rape. They found him not guilty of the rape charge itself, but guilty of attempting it. After hearing the evidence and the statements about the nature of the attack, the jury recommended a death sentence, and the court approved that recommendation. In the years that followed, Henderson began challenging the conviction through appeals. Many of these appeals focused on issues involving the forensic testing used during the trial. When the case began in 1985, forensic science was not as advanced as it is today. Henderson argued that the early testing methods could not fully prove his involvement. He also raised questions about how the evidence was collected and how some statements were handled. His lawyers said that the results of certain tests were uncertain because they were based on the technology available at the time. Courts reviewed these arguments, but none of the appeals resulted in a change to his conviction or death sentence. In 2022, Henderson filed a petition under Ohio's serious mental illness law. This law allows a person on death row to request a review if they believe they had a serious mental illness at the time of the crime. Henderson said he met the conditions for this review, and he asked the court to change his sentence. The court studied medical records, past evaluations, and information from mental health experts. In August 2025, the Court of Appeals of Ohio denied the request. The judges ruled that the information presented did not meet the legal requirements needed to change the sentence. This meant that the death sentence would remain in place. Another major factor in the timeline of the case was a policy shift by the governor of Ohio. For several years, Ohio postponed executions because the state could not obtain the drugs used in lethal injection procedures. As a result, Henderson's earlier execution dates were delayed. In 2023, the governor issued another delay that included Henderson and several other inmates. When the state later reset its schedule, a new date of October 21, 2026 was assigned to Henderson. That date appears on the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections official list. Case 13. Gary Wayne Sutton is on Tennessee's death row, and the state has set his execution date for December 3, 2026. His name appears on Tennessee's official execution schedule, and the date was announced after years of pauses in the state's death penalty system. Sutton's case has been in the courts for more than 30 years, and it continues to be discussed because of the serious charges, the long appeal history, and ongoing questions raised by his lawyers about the evidence used at trial. The case is connected to the 1992 deaths of Tommy Griffin and Connie Branham, two siblings who were found in different locations in Tennessee. According to court records, the case began in February 1992 when Griffin and Branham were reported missing. Later, their bodies were found in separate places. Griffin had been shot, and Branham was discovered inside her burned vehicle. Investigators soon focused on Sutton and his uncle, James Dellinger, as the main suspects. Witnesses reported seeing Sutton and Dellinger with the victims not long before they disappeared. The physical evidence included the burned car, the condition of the bodies, and statements collected from people who saw the group together that day. The case quickly gained attention because the victims were siblings. The crime involved more than one location, and the events happened within a short time frame. Sutton was first tried in Blount County, Tennessee, where prosecutors focused on the killing of Tommy Griffin. The jury found Sutton guilty, and he was sentenced to death. The killing of Connie Branham was handled in a separate case, where Sutton received a life sentence. Court documents show that the cases were split because the murders took place in different counties and involved different evidence. Over time, both convictions were reviewed by multiple courts. Some hearings focused on how the jury reached its decision, while others examined how the evidence had been handled. Despite the repeated legal steps, the courts kept Sutton's convictions in place. One of the major issues raised in Sutton's appeals involved the work of a former Tennessee medical examiner named Dr. Charles Harlan. His name appeared in several cases in the state, and he later lost his medical license after a series of complaints and investigations into his professional conduct. Sutton's lawyers argued that Dr. Harlan's findings should not be trusted and that his involvement created serious questions about the accuracy of the forensic evidence. Supporters of Sutton say this is important because they believe there is no strong physical link between Sutton and the murders. However, prosecutors argue that the overall case does not depend on Dr. Harlan alone and that the other evidence, including witness statements and the timeline of events, still supports the conviction. For many years, Tennessee delayed executions while officials reviewed the state's process for carrying out death sentences. Because of this review, earlier execution dates for Sutton were postponed. In 2025, the state began setting new dates, and Sutton's case was included in the updated schedule. The new date of December 3, 2026 is now listed on public records, and it places him among the individuals who may face execution in the coming years. As with most death penalty cases, Sutton still has the right to make last-minute appeals or request a stay, but as of the most recent updates, no new delay has been reported. If you enjoyed watching this video, please subscribe to my channel. I create and post daily interesting true crime and prison documentaries on the channel. Thanks for watching.